Hello, Megan.
Hello, Michelle.
Welcome to the Spicy Brain Podcast.
Podcast.
Welcome back to anybody who's joined us before. And for those of you who are new, we are two sisters who are navigating neurodiversity with curiosity, joy, and radical acceptance. So we usually get into some kind of a topic. We bring up a story, then we like to kind of usually talk about something specifically around your ADHD in this particular podcast. So again, this series is all about Driven to Distraction, a book that we've been kind of going through in detail and bringing up. And then we like to kind of think about how that affects your brain or my brain, specifically our little neurodivergentness as we go along. I've learned I'm more neurodivergent than I thought. And maybe we all are. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then we like to look at strategies and ask our community if they have any strategies. So, all right, today I want to bring up a topic.
Yes.
Okay. You, my friend, regularly tell me that you do not think people will remember you,
Correct.
which blows my mind because I believe you might be one of the most memorable people anybody I know has. Like, you to me are memorable. But tell me a little bit more about, like, what is that like for you, and when does that happen that you think people aren't going to remember you?
Okay. Well, I'm trying to think specifically, but okay. If I have to reach out to somebody that maybe I worked with in the past, like I'm thinking of something very specific. Her name was Brooke, and I worked with her on a show called Quilters. It's
Oh,
all about women
yeah.
making quilts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like one of my first like professional technical shows that I had worked backstage on.
Mm.
And so I don't remember why, but I had to email her. Oh, and then sorry, back. And then I also worked with her on my very first professional show, Anger Box, where she was in it, I was in it. So we knew each other, and I I had to reach out to her for some reason, or I think maybe I saw her, or I can't remember what it was, but I reached out to her via
There was
email.
something about when something about New York. She
Yeah, yeah,
was
yeah.
going
Oh,
there,
that's
or
right.
you were going there. Something. It was something with New York. Yeah.
I think I saw her, but I wasn't
Mm.
sure it was her. I was like, "I think I saw her."
Mm.
I was just like,
Yeah.
that's so this is how New York is. It's so random, and you see people that you know, like that from your childhood. You're like, How do I?"
How are you in New York and I'm in New York at the same time? But that's
Yeah.
just how it is.
It
Okay.
is. And so I emailed her to say, "Hey, I don't know if you remember me, but, and I kind of gave a quick rundown of who I was. And I think I saw you in New York City. Like, are you really in New York City? Is that you?" And
Yeah.
I remember her first line back to me was like, "Of course, Megan, I remember you." I just was like, "Okay, well, I just never assume, like, I don't wanna be that awkward person who's like, 'Hey, Michelle, remember
Yeah.
me?'" And then the entire time you're just like, "I don't know
No,
who in the
I don't
heck you
I don't
are."
remember you at all.
Oh my gosh, it's so good to I don't wanna be delusional. I think that's the thing.
Right,
Like, I'm not
right,
delusional because I forget a lot of people.
right. So you just assume also that would be true for others maybe?
Well, actually, no, it's not true. I forget people's names, but not the person. Like, I'll see a
Yeah.
person, I'll remember them.
Yeah,
But it
I'm that
does.
way too, where, like, I remember faces really well, but not always names.
But see, now that we're saying this, I'm
Yeah.
thinking actually that maybe it's an opposite reaction. Like, I remember everybody that I
Mm,
visually see,
mm,
and I notice a lot of people don't. And so I assume that, well, if I can do it, then maybe other people can't. And so
mm,
I just assume that you probably aren't gonna remember me if it's been more than a year.
mm.
Also, I just feel like it's pretty, like a lot of hubris you have to be like, "You have to remember me after
Yeah,
10
I'm
years of not
yeah.
seeing me." I think it's pretty.
So, the thing I wanted to bring up though from the book Driven to Distraction was that in general, one of the things that they talked about with people with ADHD specifically, again, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is that often you're inaccurate self-observers. Like you have a poor gauge about what your impact is for positive or
Oh.
negative. And I wonder if that's part of it or not. I don't know, but I thought it was interesting. Like, it's hard to say like, "Oh, yes, I recognize I'm a bad, poor self-observer." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think this could be part of it is that you think people don't that you're not memorable somehow, and so you're not I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
Well, I'm wondering, is this also about time? Like, have we talked about time blindness?
Yes, a little bit, but yeah.
Okay. Is that this, do we think?
I think it's that you don't know how what you do might impact others
Mm.
in some way. Like, you can't gauge the impact you're having. And so you're
Well,
not
yeah,
I
because
I
people don't
think
tell
maybe.
me. People don't tell me. They're like, just this blank wall of like, so I don't know. Like, okay, I remember very specifically in middle school,
Uh-huh.
and all of the guys were like my friends.
Mm.
And so they would all tell me about the really cute girl in class and how hot she was, and just like I waxed rhapsodically about her. And
Mhm.
so they never mentioned anything about me, which I mean, obviously they wouldn't to my face. I know this now, but as a young impressionable person, I didn't know. So it never occurred to me that like somebody would have liked me because no one like unless they told me I wouldn't have known. There were like two boys I knew that liked me
Yeah.
because I they told me.
Yeah.
Come to find out, a decade later that one of the guys in my class actually thought I was super cute and was caught looking at my butt.
Oh. Oh,
It just, like,
caught.
blew my mind. I was like, "Wait, someone was looking at my butt? Like, what?"
You did not realize that your derriere had impact.
It has some impact, can I tell you, but ho, 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 it's got some impact in Capone. So, part of it is that, like, if I have to if I don't hear it, then the only thing I'm hearing all the time is just like, "Oh, Megan, you're so annoying. Oh, Megan, you're so this, you're so that." Not like the good stuff. It's like I do know that I have some impact, and it's
Mhm.
not always a positive impact,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Because that's the one thing that people are vocal about. People are vocal about the negativity, and when you do something wrong. We've talked about this before in one of our other podcasts about how
Mm.
there was a lot of, like, verbalization around negative stuff, and if it's not if the positive's not also verbalized, then how do you know that you're creating anything positive in the world?
Right. And what's interesting is to me that is that sort of self-observation that I am creating a positive impact. And not being able to to kind of see that for yourself, you would need a lot more direct communication around that
Well,
potentially.
does your butler tell you that you're awesome?
Yeah, all the time.
Oh, man, my butler's a jerk. He's so lazy.
I
Just
mean,
like,
I don't mean to say like I'm awesome, but I see like, "Oh, I did this
"You
thing and
are
this had this."
awesome." No, no,
Yeah.
no.
No,
Stop. You are awesome.
well, thank you. No, I agree that I am, and I'm able to take that more, but I'm saying I see the impact I have. I see what I'm doing. I also see
Mm,
when I do something negative, right? And or something that is perceived that way by others. Um, but I do see what I'm bringing to the world, whereas I feel like for you, that is actually harder for you to kind of keep in your head.
yeah. Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't
mean to
always
say that
see
you don't see it ever, but I just mean it doesn't stick.
yeah, I also don't see the negative. It's like I hear the negative, but I don't
Yeah.
necessarily see when I'm being negative, like, when I'm doing something that's negative. So, I mean, I
Because I don't
wonder.
think you're trying to do things that are negative. I just think it's other people's reaction to what you're doing. It
Yeah,
has a negative impact on them for whatever reason, but
all those
I never
sensitive
see you're coming
snowflakes
from
out there.
a but I don't think you're coming from a place of negativity around it generally.
No, I just am being myself, and people are like, I don't like that,"
Yeah.
usually.
Well, I mean, do you think that's always true now, or do you think that is just an old tape? Do you know what I mean? Like, is that still true?
Mm, dang, that was a deep question.
Well, I just
No,
mean as
it's a good no, Michelle, I
yeah,
will answer it. You don't have to,
okay.
like, fill the space for a second. I will answer it. I'm just saying it was a it was, like, a good deep question
Mhm.
because you're right. I it is an old tape, and when I when I visualize myself, I'm younger,
Mm.
and I'm trying to imagine now, like, I don't actually have a ton of experiences where people find me negative, like, in a negative light,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to think if I did, it's probably in a group setting of some sort,
Mm.
and it's people that, like, it's like randos,
Randos. Well,
randos,
because
as
you
the
have more
kids say.
control now than, like, when you were a kid, right? All of us
Yeah.
do, not having to necessarily I mean
Oh, so
oh,
work.
oh,
Yeah.
work.
No, I think there were some people at work who didn't like me. And it totally had to do with my personality. But they respected me for my work ethic, but they necessarily didn't particularly like my personality.
Okay. Did you notice that then, or did it take a minute for you to understand that? Like, I sort of picture you kind of walking into every situation being like little Rosie, like, "I'm so awesome. I'm so great." And then it's like you kinda or you're like Eeyore, "Meh, meh," like, it's what depending on the day, the mood, but you're in there, and then it doesn't I sort of see you walking through life almost like blind sometimes to the others around you at a time, right?
I
Like, that you're
I
not
think no, I think there is okay, so I would say, like, the whole Rosie thing, like, the little, like, "I'm so that thing,
Yeah.
that is, like, the internal tape that's playing in my head at all times,
Mm,
but I have been burned by it so many times that I walk into every new situation extremely cautious,
mm,
and to the point, like, where people think I am shy.
mm.
Like, people
Wow.
when they first meet me always think I'm shy.
Really?
Yes, no joke, like, I think
Wow.
across the board, everyone has thought that I am shy. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't think that you were gonna be such an extrovert." Because and
Mm,
this is trauma, like, just walking in, I go at it from the sense of I need to protect myself because I don't know what I'm walking into.
mm,
I I do think I'm awesome, and because I think I'm awesome, that comes across the wrong way, and so I just have to kinda get the lay of the land before I can tell myself that I'm safe, and then even
mhm.
then, I still screw up and tell somebody that I'm a master solderer, and then they all make fun of me. So, it's just
Wait. We gotta dig into this a little bit. So, okay, first of all, I wanna get to the topic and make sure that it's about you being able to observe yourself
yes.
and gauge your impact. So, you said to somebody that you worked with that you were a master solderer.
Yes.
So,
'Cause in
when
my
you
head, I
yeah.
had all of the competitions. When I was 10 years old, I had
Okay.
the awesomeness, like,
Okay, so we gotta rewind. So,
okay.
obviously, we're sisters, right?
Yes.
And
I hope
we
so.
grew up in the same house, and our dad taught us how to solder, like electrical soldering, think of a circuit board,
Mhm.
all the components that you got we learned to do that at age what, 9?
Okay, 8 or 9, yeah.
8 or 9. So we were there with, like, a very hot iron and molten, you
Resin,
know,
uh,
solder,
solder,
which is
yeah.
like this melty, metal
Yep.
that melts easily. And we were soldering electrical components and breathing in probably fumes that weren't so good and washing it with trichloroethylene, which is who knows, probably why my brain is mush now. But anyway, so all
Mhm.
that was happening. And we really did learn to become master electrical like component solderers, I would say, very
Yeah.
strong abilities. We could read a schematic, we could do all those things. And we were fast, right?
And I had the perfect solder dome.
Yeah.
Like, I figured out a way to, like because of my hyper focusing, I figured out a way to, like, make the perfect dome of
Yeah.
solder. That wasn't too much, it wasn't too little, it was
It's just perfect.
perfect.
Yes. So, okay, so that's true, but there is such a thing as a title of master solderer in the military.
Correct.
Correct. And you were saying it more like, "Oh, I'm really good at this thing. I learned to do this well."
Yeah. Well, because I had to eventually figure out how to put that in my resume as, like, sort of a fun fact about me, and so I
Mhm.
just, like I always in my mind had gone to these, like I was always in these, like, soldering competitions in my mind. Remember how, like, I did the competitions for, like, word searches in my
Yes.
mind? I
Yes.
went to soldering competitions in my mind, and I was
Yeah,
like
just because it was hours and hours a day of at 10
yeah.
of doing something very boring.
Oh, I loved it. I didn't
But
think it
you
was
loved it.
boring.
But I'm just saying it, you made a
Yeah.
whole game of it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it could have been boring, right?
So
Because it
in
was
my
repetition.
head, I was like, "I'm a master solderer,"
Yeah.
like, I mastered it, and I
Yeah.
meant it in the manner of, like, I mastered soldering. I am not a master solderer,
Yes.
but I mastered soldering.
Sure.
So and this guy, like, is probably the grumpiest Eeyore of them all,
Yes.
and I flippantly mentioned this because 'cause I'm trying to, like, gain a little favor with him, not knowing that master solderer is a title. And let me tell you, when I
Oh.
said those 2 words,
Oh.
the the grin on that man's face,
Wow.
like, he was just so excited to, like,
Put you down.
put me down
Put you
and
in place.
put me in my place, yes.
Yes.
Like, and then I remember Brian was like, "Megan, why do
How did
you
you
do this? Like, why?" And I was like, "I don't know why. I was trying to connect."
But I think that's you, like, accurately judging your impact at that moment, right? Like, you said this thing, it had an impact,
Mm.
right? That's you accurately judging that that was not he
That's
did not
true.
right?
Well, but I didn't judge the fact that, like, I shouldn't say it. Like, I saw the impact it had, but now when I think about this man,
Mhm.
I think he probably thinks I'm, like, the most obnoxious person, and I could be
Mm.
completely wrong. And I think that
Mm.
was the thing that, my friend Latoya, who's, like, my dear friend from there.
Love Latoya, such a sweetie.
Hi,
We
Latoya.
love you, we miss you.
She was our wingman advocate, and she was the one who said, like I was really terrified to, like, wear my Celebrate Diversity pin that has, like, the rainbow flag on it,
Mm.
and I wanted to, but I was scared of doing that, and she's like, "Go for it, like, you get like, wear it, do what you wanna
Mm.
do," because like, I just kind of
Mm.
knew, like, that was not the vibe at that
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
Or that was my vibe, and it's what I felt, and she's like, "Megan, you have to, like, own who you are because who you
Mm.
are is important, and who you are is necessary to these people to be yourself." Like, I wanted to just dye my hair, and I was like, "Can I color my hair?" Like, a funny color, like, not just like a regular normal color, but I was worried about, like, what I don't know if someone's gonna like it or not, and so that was always the issue for me is, like, because people wouldn't tell me, I wouldn't know until all of a sudden I'm in this, like, whirlwind of hurt with because I was supposed to have known this whole time that I was impacting people in a certain way. Like, there's, like, all these rules, these societal rules I'm supposed to know,
Mm. Mm.
and so I don't know that I've offended somebody until, like, I've offended them multiple times and it blows up into this gigantic thing. And
Mm.
and, there's part of it now that, like, in therapy, they said, like, "Look, it's everyone's responsibility to tell you if they have an issue. It's
Mhm.
you can't, like, just walk around your life trying to predict because that's what I ended up doing. I tried to mitigate everything that I did so that I wouldn't offend people to the
Mm.
point of not being myself, not wanting to have, like, my colored hair, not wanting to have my Celebrate Diversity pin on me because I didn't want to offend people because I knew they wouldn't tell me.
Mm.
And then it would blow up, it would compound, like, there would be, well, first it was the sticker, and then it was her hair, and then she said this, and then she did that, and then all of a sudden, like, I'm being kicked out of my job because I didn't know something. And so
Interesting.
I went the opposite way of just like, okay, I will morph myself to whatever needs to be or whatever I think
Mm.
needs to be, but it wasn't always right. So even me attempting to like what's the word? Like precede it, attempting to like what word am I thinking?
Supersede it, like, trying to, like, get ahead of it?
Yeah, even in me trying to get ahead of it, I still never could because I couldn't gauge properly what I needed to get ahead of. I was just getting
Mm,
ahead, like, let's say I had a bad interaction with one person, I would try to get ahead of in the next interaction, that similar interaction with them based on what that person thought, but that one person might have a completely different set of thoughts than the other, so it's like I might be getting
mm.
ahead for that person for, like, the
But then
initial
there's
one.
another 100 people you have to get and figure out. So it
Yeah,
became, like, literally figuring out that puzzle of that person and then the next one and then the next one.
right.
I wanna dig in here just a little bit more because I wonder for you how you perceive this. Is it I mean, and it's hard to say, right? So, like, when I see somebody, I see a lot of their facial cues, I see I listen and hear their tone. I'm getting this sense of like this is okay with somebody or it's not. And there's a lot of this navigating that we have to do. And I'm wondering if somehow because your attention is so scattered, oftentimes, I shouldn't say scattered, right? That's the wrong thing, but it's like it, you have less control over what you're paying attention to,
Yeah,
it
that's
seems,
true.
right? We've talked about that many times. So I'm wondering if some of these very small cues that would be, sort of the things that you learn to grow up looking at, maybe you just don't even see them, or you may not have cataloged them as much because your attention got diverted somewhere else. I'm wondering.
That's an interesting question and thought. Uh, the first thing that I thought of was a theatrical script
Mm,
and being in a scene with somebody, and actually, I can all those little micro movements I have cataloged and I have categorized. It's so when I the challenge is like, okay, let me bring my brain back for a second. The When I'm in a scene with somebody
mhm,
in like the theater or acting, I don't have to spend any time on the dialogue.
mm,
So the conversation is not taking up memory or taking up bites because it's already been decided what the dialogue's gonna be.
because 'cause you've memorized it.
Yeah, I've memorized the script,
Okay.
and so I don't need a butler to help me figure out what the conversation is. So my butler is
Mm,
free now to pick up on these little micro moments. And it's actually
mm,
why I'm a really good actor because I can sense what people are saying
hmm,
in real time. Like I can pick up what my actor is saying and then I can respond to those micro movements and micro incidences and whatever they are. I can respond to them in real time. And like that's where, in one of my scenes, my teacher was like praising me at one point. He's like, "Did you see what she did? She did an amazing thing." Like where he starts saying something and she started making fun of him and his accent because this guy was French. And
mm,
so she was like the character was being annoying, she was annoyed, and so then what she did was in response, she took the same line that didn't have any affectation on it, but she took that line and then said it back to him in his accent, which is
mm.
what people do. It's like, "It was great, it was brilliant." And the
It's
reason I
what
did it was
actually
because
happens, right, yeah.
yeah. So I think that but what's interesting though is that if you put me in an improv setting, I am
Mm,
terrible at that because there's too many
mhm,
variables I'm trying to keep track of.
interesting, and, like, life is improv.
Yeah. So, like,
Huh.
I'm great one-on-one with somebody
Mhm,
that
mhm.
I trust and I'm here with. Like, I'm thinking about it's okay, we talked about Latoya, like, when I go and hang out with Latoya, it's, like, super easy. We have fun, and we're sitting and chatting and just, like, going on and on and on about our lives and the ridiculousness
Yeah,
because
and that's
I'm not at all worried about, "Does she like me? Does she not?" Like, we already have established that. Although I did have to establish with her, like, I was
uh-oh.
when we were, like it was like I just found out we were moving, and I was devastated, and and I was telling her, I was like, I had to talk to her about this before I could, like, go any further because I was just it was weighing on my mind, and I couldn't pay attention to anything else, and I was just like
Mm.
I was like, "Okay, so I have to tell you that I just love you, and I know this is awkward, but, like, I need you to know that I love you," and she's like, "I love you too," and I was like, "Oh my god." Like, I forgot that there's,
Problem.
like it's still hard to tell people that to drop
Yeah.
the L word with, like,
Yeah, right. With
friends.
a friend, right? It's super hard.
You're
Yeah.
like, "Is
Yeah.
this too soon? Like, can we talk about
Like,
this?"
are we yeah, it's like you feel like you're back in middle
Like, "Are
school
we
in
going
some way.
steady now?" Like
Your husband's like, "Should I be jealous? Like, what's happening?" No, but, I think when you're saying it, it's interesting because I'm wondering there's 2 pieces of this to me as we're talking about it. One is that you're not always aware how much other people love you and care about you unless it's stated explicitly.
Yeah.
And there's this other piece of your actual working memory and everything that we know about we're learning, like you and I are learning about ADHD, that this is again a neurobiological situation where I just read I'm we'll be starting on a new series about a book that's specifically women with ADHD coming up. But what's interesting to me is they were talking about it like a computer, and I thought you being a computer person would probably appreciate this analogy that you can have a really high end amazing computer, but that if you don't have the right, you're going to say it and I'm going to get it wrong, but the right processing power or something, I forget what they you probably know the right term, right?
Mhm.
But, RAM or ROM or I don't know, something anyway, in there that you can have all of this amazing hardware and it's just not connecting right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of what's interesting is that maybe, like you're saying, because life isn't scripted, you're using all of this bandwidth of your brain to just process and figure out what you're supposed to say next, that maybe you actually kind of are blind to what people are feeling or those little micro movements because your brain is really processing something else
Yeah.
that maybe seems like a higher priority, like verbally responding or
Yeah.
something, right?
Which is why I think it can come across as maybe people might think you're autistic because 'cause you're like, you can't pick up on the social cues. But
Mm,
really, it's like, I do pick up on social cues. It's just there's a lot of factors that go into, can I keep concentration?
mm,
So, for instance, anytime that Brian and I are in the car, if there is music on or if there's something like
yeah,
some sound happening, I have to mute it in order to talk to him. Because
mm,
'Cause I've learned that, like, I just can't process what he's saying with something else in the background.
mm.
And growing up, like, I remember there was always a television on in the background,
Yeah,
or,
that was
you
always
anywhere
hard.
you
Yeah,
go to, like, doctor's offices or someone's
always something.
house,
Yeah,
there's always something. Music is okay as long as there's no lyrics. But for me personally, because of my auditory processing, and I know
mhm,
this is different for a lot of different ADHDers, but like for me, if there are lyrics and if there is something in the background, I cannot concentrate. So if you get me in a group setting where there's
mm,
other people talking, like I struggle to focus on one person or to
hmm,
like I can like listen into the whole conversation, but it's hard to process it. It takes a lot of energy, which is why class was always really hard.
yeah. There's so many inputs coming all at once.
Then you add smells,
Mhm, mm,
then you add taste
yeah,
and sound and like all these
yeah,
senses we've talked about, and
yeah,
then you put all that in there and it becomes too difficult to pick up on like little minute like little, minutia in someone's face.
right, and so then you wouldn't really know you really wouldn't know because you don't have the data stored anywhere to say this person likes me or this person doesn't. This person had a hard time with me or this person doesn't.
Yeah,
Maybe.
because well, it's not even just the data, it's like it's the blindness aspect of it, like, you just
Yeah.
don't see it. They talk about, like, with pictures, like
Mhm,
paintings, you can look at a painting and our brains will naturally if it like I think it was the Last Supper,
mm,
and there's, like, something about the Last Supper, like, where if you look at it, there are elements that you won't actually see until someone points it out to you, and they're like, "Did you notice that there was this one specific thing there?" And you're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even see it." Because our
right.
brains are so good at cutting things out in order to help us process the bare minimum. which is what
Mm.
happens with people when they're on their computers all the time. It's like, you're trying to help them find something. They're like, "I did not even like, oh my gosh, it's so obvious, but I
Yeah.
didn't see it." It's like, "Of
Okay,
course you
fine.
didn't
That
see
was
it.
me like 4 seconds ago. Got it. Got it.
Of course, Michelle, you didn't see that your microphone was off mute because there was other
Yeah.
things going
Yeah.
on."
Yeah.
And that's okay because that's our brain's evolutionary thing that it's done to be able to keep us protected and safe.
Sure.
So when when we add a society to all of that and to say like you have to be able to pick up on my expressions to know
Mhm.
what I'm talking about, like to know not talking about what to know what I am thinking
Mhm.
as opposed to me just telling you.
Yeah. It's fascinating because I think it helps everyone to just say out loud what you're feeling or thinking.
Yeah.
I'm curious what some strategies you found that might be helpful in this and remembering that people, first of all, remember you.
Yeah.
But in terms of navigating this thing of like, I'm not sure if somebody is just being polite or if they really like me or if they're really upset with me. And, like you said,
Mm.
you having to navigate this work situation where, you didn't even want to, it sounds like, express yourself and express because you were worried, this person was really not gonna take that well or something, or
Yeah.
have something against you. Now, I'm curious, did you wore your pride stuff, I'm assuming, because 'cause you're
Mhm.
that kind of person also. What what happened with that coworker? I mean, did he end up being the curmudgeon? Once you did express who you were, did it pan out? Were you right? Or was it maybe a little more nuanced than that?
Oh, it's for sure more nuanced. I mean, I think that I don't think that we ideologically saw eye to eye,
Mm,
obviously,
sure.
but he also kept talking to me and
Mm,
he respected my abilities, and at one point he brought me a circuit board so that I could do something really specific and like something totally nerdy. He's like, "Hey, if you take this and you do da 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 da." So he knew that I had this interest.
mm.
And I think at one point he's like, "Give it to your husband, he can do it." And I was like, "He's never gonna use it, okay? He doesn't know how to use a soldering iron. It's for me." But he gave me like so I think that it's like, okay, that's just Megan. And it's like,
Mhm.
that's Megan, but also Megan is not just these specific things.
Hmm.
So I think there's a couple of things with the question you asked. The first thing is I had to subject myself to units of distress.
Mm.
So this is the second part of my trauma therapy that I went through, which was really helpful for me, which was
Mm.
prolonged exposure therapy. So
Yeah.
because I one of my tax techniques was I just would ignore everything. I didn't subject myself to these units of distress on like a regular basis, and so I just became terrified of like the smallest thing, like going to the grocery store, because over time, if you just don't subject yourself to these things, if you
Right.
don't desensitize yourself, right, it can lead to bigger problems. And so I think part of it is like because I had the job where I was nervous and I subjected myself to like, okay, I'm gonna wear my pin and see what happens. And so then I was aware. I was like, okay, now I have this pin. I'm looking at people's faces to see what happens.
Mm.
And like I totally know. Like there was a guy who like came up and like, he's a sweet man. I love him. And he would just like he's like looking at my lanyard. I mean, you would think like he's looking at my chest, but he's like looking at my lanyard. He looks back up my face, looks at my lanyard, and he's like, huh. And he walks I was like, "Are you okay there? Like, what's going on? Is everything like, how are you doing today? Is everything okay? Can I help you with anything?" And he's just like, "Ugh," he walks off. Then he comes back, after his training, and then he's just like, looks at my chest again, like my lanyard, looks back at me, he's like, "You're one of those hippie girls, aren't you?" But he ended up becoming like one of my biggest advocates there,
Mm.
So having seen that like I could still fit in and we could totally disagree but still respect each other
Yeah.
led me now to this job, this new one that I just got, which I got a job, guys.
Yay!
Woo.
Congratulations. Woo, woo, woo.
So leading to this new job of me just unapologetically saying, "I am ADHD. I am
Yeah.
awesome. I am
Yeah.
fabulous." And I'm going to go in there with that mentality and not ask for I'm not going to be asking for permission I'll
Mm.
ask for forgiveness if I need it, but, like, I'm gonna go in knowing who
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, and I think when you're saying that, it's interesting because you almost did an experiment in a sense, like, you really focused you used your hyper focus to really focus on people and figure out, "What is my impact, and what is that about?" So that's interesting to me that you kind of it went in with intention with that, seems like.
Yeah, and I think that now because I've been through so much therapy and I've done these experiments,
Mhm.
I'm starting to recognize more that I do have impact on people,
Mm.
and I'm able to own that.
Hmm.
When I think about little Rosie as a 5-year-old, I had no clue. Because like, I was living in my own world, I was just like
Yeah.
I just and I think that, we're talking about impact, I think that also is a part of it where it's like my ADHD flow and world
Mhm.
can probably look like I'm ignoring people,
Mm.
because I am, and not meaning to. It's not like
No,
it's
but you're
not.
just in your own flow, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that, like, I'm learning how to, like, take breaks
Mm.
and step outside for a minute. I'm learning how to, like, check in with people, which is really hard for me. But, like, the
Mm.
new one that I do now is, like, I just ask people for what I need. So, like, when I was learning how to cook more, I just would ask Brian, I'm like, "Okay, what do we like in this meal and how can I make it better?"
Mm.
That way, like, I know what's good and I also know what can be I'm not worried about anything else 'cause, like, I know I can ask for that now.
Mhm.
And I think the other thing is just,
You
like,
don't have to guess, right? You can
yeah,
ask. Yeah.
yeah, I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet with, like, people,
Mm.
but I just with people, I really go back to, like, it's the other person's responsibility to tell me if there's an issue,
Mhm.
because I can't read your mind.
Yeah.
And nor should I have to read your mind. So if you are
Yeah.
frustrated, then come tell me. And I am now, more stable. So I can say, okay, let's listen to, like, I will listen to it. We can talk about this. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and try to, like, spend my energy worrying if I've offended you or not. Like, I probably will anyways because I'm ADHD. I can't help it. But I'm not going to, like, dedicate the amount of time I was in the past. Like, I'm going to look at
Yeah.
it, and if I need to ask a question, like, I'll go to somebody like, "Michelle, hey, that interaction, like, how are you feeling after that? Like, did it
Right.
come across anyway?" Like, I'll just ask the question now.
I think it's interesting because so much of at least our upbringing, I think I can say our in this, but maybe not, but is sort of this there's a lot hidden, right? There's a lot of hidden rules and hidden emotions and not expressing exactly how you feel and kind of, you know,
Sweeping things under the rug.
yeah, and that you're not supposed to make a big deal about this or that or the other thing. And so I think, one of the things is, you feel things in a very like overt way. But I think this idea that you're saying is so true and that you shouldn't have to guess. And I think no one should have to actually. And I think everyone should be responsible for their own emotions and expressing when they're upset about something. And I think we in general don't have as much practice around that in certain communities, certain groups, right? And I can't speak to everyone, but I just think our situation growing up, it was that way for sure in my
Well,
mind.
that's just I mean, but that's also just what society that's how people were raised, like, I
Yeah.
go back to, like, every time we're talking about this, I think of Victorian times,
Yes.
where it's like you cannot talk about this stuff, and, our grandparents, like, did not like, you could not talk about this
No,
stuff, and I
you're
think
not
that's
allowed to have emotions or show, was it keep calm and carry on or whatever the queen, right, was sort of that
yeah,
idea. Yeah, the queen.
and
Yeah.
and that is probably, like, one of the best equalizers that the internet has given us is that you can find people who are in similar situations with you, and you can find people
Mhm.
and connect on challenges, and I think it's okay for us to be talking about this stuff because it's much healthier. I mean, there's a reason that there's epidemics of, like, of health issues and obesity
Mhm.
and all of these things because, like, we're just not dealing with a lot of it. And
Mhm.
it's really important for us also our world is a lot more complicated, and,
Sure.
the amount of people we talk to, before maybe you might only ever know, like, the small amount of people in your town. And
Mhm.
so you just it was different, it was easier to deal with it because you only had so many inputs, but, like, now we just have input everywhere. And
So you're saying the way we are sort of societally with all the input, it's kinda making everybody ADHD.
oh, yeah,
In a
100%.
way, because it's just too hard to navigate all these things in some
Well,
sense.
you see the backlash right now of social media with, like, the younger generations, they're saying, "Well, I wanna unplug. This is just
Mhm.
too much, like, I'm gonna go and, live in a van and
Yeah.
roam the world," because, like, it's just too much. It's like our brains cannot handle it. We were not meant to be this much of a information processing world. And I think that that's the challenge, is that, like, my brain can process so much information so quickly,
Mhm.
but at a cost. And so now everyone is sort of kind of getting that like, everyone starting to see,
Fatigue. Yeah.
yeah, they're getting that fatigue. They're like, the fact that people know what brain fog is, like, that's I've dealt with that
Mhm.
my entire life. But
Sure.
because we're starting to see it, and we can all talk about it as a more, like, giant societal conversation, it's opening up these questions that people like myself have had for 40 years.
Mhm.
And there's a reason we're talking about ADHD more, because people are like, "Am I ADHD?" Like, "No, it's probably just technology."
Yeah.
Technology makes you ADHD, like, having this phone that's constantly buzzing and binging and doing all those things, that is what my brain does
Already.
inherently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think it's interesting when you've been saying this because I remember I had this natural instinct of, like, not wanting to be on social media just immediately. And I just I knew I could only handle so many people at a
yeah,
time, right? And part of it is my job. I deal with hundreds of people, so I don't, I just at the end of my day, I'm not interested in talking
talking.
more
Yeah.
or interacting more. But I think what I like about what you've said is again your intentionality and making a point to try to with what you're specifically dealing with, actually asking and trying to get information from people. What I mean by you don't have enough data is I meant it's you don't have enough points of remembering what you saw or having taken that in the moment necessarily sometimes
I
too
will
and
actually make a little, because I'm seeing a Netflix thing in my head right now,
mm,
and I was listening to this critique about, because we have so many options of things to watch now,
mhm.
we actually don't remember half the stuff that we've watched.
Yes, that's what I was
So,
exactly,
it's not
exactly.
the lack of data, it's too much data.
Mm,
Like,
mm,
I see all of the little micro movements that are happening,
mhm.
but the question is, like, what can be retained in, like, I'm seeing that on top of everything
Yes.
else.
Yeah, that is a better way to say it. I don't mean you
Yeah,
don't see it, I just mean you don't keep it.
you're right.
Right, because your brain has to filter out something because you're seeing everything, and that's one
Yeah.
of the things I don't like about what it's the title of attention deficit, because I think it's actually the opposite. It's you're attending to so many things, extra things, and you're not it's just the filter of what's most important or not is harder for you to control, I think.
Well, yeah. Yeah, the filter. My filtering system is
The
definitely.
butler, right? What's priority
Well, that's
versus
the
what
thing is, right,
isn't.
I
Yeah,
love the butler because, like, if you think back to, like, the Victorian time, the
yeah.
butler was the person who made the decisions of who got access to the person
Yes,
or not.
right.
They filtered all the food and all the questions and everything. I mean, I love the idea of the butler. The
You
butler
want
helped you
one.
get
I
dressed.
think you want an actual
I
butler is
want
what
a
it
real
is.
butler.
I know, right? How awesome.
That'd be
I'm very
amazing.
curious what our community does for this because this idea that, again, going back to the fact that you don't always know the impact you have on people, and you're saying sort of like ask what your impact is, right? Check in with people on that. And I'm curious if other people have had other strategies that they might have used to help them with this because I think it is pretty common not really understanding how what you're doing is impacting those around you sometimes I think can be true.
Yeah. And also, like, allowing for what someone says to you to actually stick.
Mm,
I've had to, like, write myself an affirmation book. I put notes on my mirror with a
mhm,
dry erase marker.
mhm,
You
you
can
do,
also
yeah.
use permanent marker, and you can take it off with alcohol. So
Nice.
you can do that too. But, you
Let's
know, like,
also keep it the positive things. We don't need to write a bunch of stuff in permanent marker on our mirrors that aren't positive, right? But
no,
yeah,
never done
no,
that.
that's terrible.
But, like like, the other day, I was the other like, one of the podcasts I was asking you, and you're like, "You are memorable," and I'm like, "Wait, why?" Like, I don't understand, like, why?
Yeah.
And so I've had to really take those things and try to internalize them,
Mm,
and when I ask the question why, I have to really sit with it and think it. Like, it's one thing to ask for, like, advice or questions, but then to sit with it and, like, internalize it somehow, which is
giving
not
yourself
easy.
space to do that and also remembering to go back to do it.
That's the thing. That's the
That's
only
the thing.
reason why this podcast has been helpful for me, because I have to go back and edit it, and then
Mm.
I have to revisit the questions that we talk about, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah, I did
right.
do that, alright.
Ooh."
Well, thank you for sitting with me today and talking about this. I think it's so fun to see the growth that both of us are having and in getting this time together. It's just such a joy, and I love
It
you.
is. I love you too.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Spicy Brain Podcast, brought to you by Spicy Brain Studios. This episode wraps up our series of exploring the book Driven to Distraction, where we took a deep dive into symptoms of ADHD. We hope you enjoyed us navigating our neurodivergent brains through curiosity, joy, and radical acceptance. Please share it with someone you think might benefit from the conversation so that we can help us spread the message. And don't forget to follow us on whatever platform you're currently listening to so that you can get notified each week. Because next week, we are starting a new series discussing the topics from the book Women with Attention Deficit Disorder, where their tagline is Embrace Your Differences and Transform Your Life. I am excited to delve into the specifics of how women deal with ADHD, especially since a lot of our listeners are female. But until then, here is to a great end of the week, and remember to stay curious.